Joining us on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line is the former head of NFL refs, who is now the rules expert for the sport of football for Fox Sports, our buddy Mike Pereira, back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, Mike, you know what? There's lots going on involving the profession of officiating, certainly professionally. What in the world is happening with the roughing the passer penalties? What is happening?
Well, I mean, I really don't know, because if you look at the overall trend, the number of calls for roughing the passer
They're down.
has declined this year.
Right.
You know, and they sent out a negative message when it comes to roughing the passer calls, because prior to the season, on their points of clarifications, they had contact of the head of the helmet of the quarterback, and they said that if you're matching hands, so you're trying to bat the ball down, matching the quarterback's hand, and you make contact with the quarterback's helmet, that's not a foul unless it's with force. And so they were emphasizing not calling it, and that immediately drove the numbers down. And then you go to this week, and we have a couple of high-profile misses, and it makes you wonder, where did it come from? They're not the type that they were talking about in their preseason clarification, but still, you know, you wonder, is it a reaction because of the Tua situation and all of the notoriety there? It's not something that the league told them to call. I know that because I saw their preparation for the week, and there was one hitting the quarterback that was actually on their video, but it was completely different than what happened in both the situations with Brady and Derek Carr. I think it's just maybe some human reaction that the referees had after seeing the plays, after reading the news. That's about the only thing I can figure, but I'm also one that looks and thinks now it's a blip, that we won't see it beyond this. I know that they say the competition committee is going to talk about it. They'll spend 1 minute talking about it. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to impose any changes. They're certainly not going to go back when it comes to protecting the passer and say, okay, let's not call it if you drive him into the ground. Let's not call it if you slam him into the ground. I mean, they're not going to do that. So really nothing to me is going to change going forward, except all of this that happened in week 5 will kind of end up in the background in a week or so.
Well, you just dropped a lot in your opening statement, if you will,
Thanks.
Mike. So let's take it one step at a time here and explain to people what that video you're talking about, that you say officials see beforehand. Who makes it? When do they look at it? And you said there was nothing Tua related on it that might lead to these bizarre calls that we're seeing. What is that video that you're talking about to prep officials?
The league does a terrific job each week in putting together a video and sending it out to the officials.
All of them. All of them get it.
All the officials.
Like in an email, they all get it in an email, a link or something like that.
Sure.
Okay,
They get it, and they just click on it. They have their own system, their own internet system that they basically use. But it's to talk about plays, and what they're looking for, and the good calls that are made, and sometimes the ones that are incorrect. So they'll talk about ineligibles downfield. They'll talk about illegal contact. They'll show plays. It's ongoing training. They have that along with videos that their position supervisors put together. Their deep official supervisor, line of scrimmage official supervisor, umpire, referee. So it's an intense week, and it's good. It has to be that way. And Walt Anderson is the voiceover of the video, along with Perry Fuel, who gets involved in the video, and then, of course, the position supervisor. So it's good. I mean, and it keeps everybody aware. And
there was nothing Tua related on it? There was nothing Tua
related to Tua on it. No, there was a play on it, as there normally would be, but it was a completely different type of call. So it's just a reaction. And, I mean, if you break down both calls, the Brady thing is Jerome Boger felt like he slammed him into the ground, as part of making a tackle, which I think nobody agrees with, including me. And then you get the situation with Derek Carr, where Jones, I think it was, lands on top of him with some of his body weight, not all of his body weight, but the circumstances to that, knocking the ball loose, possessing a loose ball in his right arm.
Yes.
There's no way he could get his right arm out of there and brace his fall.
Right.
His left arm braced his fall.
Right.
So that was not a good call either. But two separate categories that, starts out really because it was Tom Brady. I mean, so that generates even more conversation just because who it is.
Yes.
And then the Derek Carr situation, which had all those other circumstances in it, which, to me, obviously doesn't make that a foul too. So it just wasn't a good weekend when it comes to that.
Well, I mean, that Chris Jones thing moment was gasoline on a fire that had already started burning out of control because of the Grady Jarrett on Brady play the day before, Mike Pereira. And now that we've established that there is no directive that you know of amongst your colleagues in the officiating profession, in the NFL officiating profession, having come down from on high saying the Tua stuff means let's start hammering down on roughing the passer in a manner that we previously to the season said let's lay off on it a little bit. Now that we've established that, this is reactive. If you're saying this is reactive, right, and you just walked us through those two moments with Jerome Boger calling it in Tampa and Carl Cheffers calling it in front of the whole country in Kansas City, this would absolutely have been fixed had this been reviewable, had this been replayable. And my question to you is, why isn't this currently reviewable in your estimation, Mike Pereira? Why?
Well, I mean, listen, you're talking to an advocate of it.
I know that.
Mean, just from the standpoint of it, in the USFL last year, we made all personal fouls calls reviewable, and I think if you're going to do it, you can't just stop with roughing the passer. I mean, everybody said, "Oh, well, that's a huge call. It's a huge call." Well, so is a chop block call that's incorrect. That carries a 15-yard penalty also. So does a face mask call that turns out it wasn't a face mask. I mean, to me, when you look at the severity of the foul, you're looking at the one that is most severe, which is pass interference, which failed miserably a couple of years ago trying to make that reviewable. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to personal fouls, I think you could make that reviewable if it's called, as we did in the USFL, but you'd have to take a different approach, and we've been through this a gazillion times. I have been an advocate of the eighth official. Call the sky judge. Yep. Call him whatever you want. Get an eighth view. College has 8 views. They have 8 officials on the field. The NFL has 7. Put a guy in a box, give him access to look at the live shot quickly, run it back and see it quickly, and then see the replays quickly, and then just give input. I don't get how it's not a lot difference when you see a block in the back call and then they pick it up. Well, why do they pick it up? Because someone that had a different angle comes in, another official, and says, hey, that block was from the side. I mean, that's the next huge step, I think, if you're going to do something, and then give that person the wherewithal to change these 2 calls that were made. So what's
I totally agree with you, Mike. You and I are lockstep on this. What is the resistance to it? What is it?
Well, I think the resistance to it is just the fact that the competition committee just feels like that's too much. That it's that they want the game played on the field, which it really isn't now, anyways. When it comes to instant replay, decisions are basically made in New York.
Right.
I think their concern is about the time, how long will it take, the disruption. I mean, I just would like them to take a look at the spring leagues and say, okay, how did it work? For example, in the USFL, in the semifinals game, we had a roughing the passer called on an interception that was an 80-yard interception, took away an 80-yard interception. It wasn't roughing the passer. It was kind of one of those where body weight, but it was to the side. He didn't land on top of him. And so, seamlessly, we just from the replay center just said it's not a foul, took it off, away we went, and it had a huge impact in the outcome of the game. It can be done, but I would like to think that they do it using a crew of 8 officials and not replay. And but we'll see. It will get discussion every year, but it usually falls flat on its face before anybody even tries it, for example, which you could in the preseason. I mean, we've said we're heading that direction anyways, right? We already let the replay official make expedited reviews. Okay, we're already doing that. So take it a step further, and I think you can avoid some of these big mistakes.
Mike, you were there at the first owners meeting the NFL Network ever covered. It was 2004, the spring. It was at the Breakers Hotel in Florida. That was where instant replay became permanent. You were in that room, and I remember Charlie Casserly was on the competition committee, told the owners, look, everybody's got it at home. Everybody sees it at home. We should use it here. And, of course, I think Mike Brown voted against it, and Al Davis abstained, and off you went, and became permanent, right? Now we have it. It's the same thing here, and we're seeing it in the game for whether the ball was spotted properly. We're seeing it in the game about whether something's a fumble or not. We're seeing it in the game to try and save challenges for coaches. Right now, we're seeing it with Hawkeye. We're seeing it. Why can't this be folded in once the season's over? I get it, right? Because they're never going to do something in the middle of the season if somebody does have an epiphany on this, right? That won't happen.
Right.
All right. So,
listen, we are lockstep in this, and it could happen if they wanted it to happen. But here's another thing. It hits its fever pitch when something like this happens in week 5, okay? Now, I've always said this, where the people say now in week 5, will they change it? Will they change this in the offseason? Trust me, when it actually gets to the first competition committee meeting, which is going to be toward the end of February, it's going to be a distant memory. It's not even going to be anything that anybody's talking about.
Unless it happens in a championship game or the Super Bowl, you might as well deal with it now before it happens in the biggest game possible.
That's it.
I mean, that's it.
It won't be a topic of discussion unless it does. That will be the time. We said that about overtime, and overtime has changed over time. But we just have to. I just have to wonder in my mind, with this happening in week 5, if it really becomes even a discussion point at the end of February.
Well, there's a way to fix that too, Mike. There's another way to fix that too.
It's a Rich Eisen campaign.
Yes, Mike.
Yes.
Put me on the competition committee. Put me on the competition committee. I will show up in Florida with a videotape or whatever manner in which they want it to be shown, a link or whatever, and a blowtorch. I will show it with both of those things, and we won't lose the intensity, to use the phrase of Michael Irvin. I will not lose the intensity because this is something that needs to change. We can see it, and it's refs helping refs. Hey, Carl, he didn't, put his full body weight on him. He couldn't have because he had the football. Hey, Jerome, he just put him from his right hip to his left hip. Pick up the flag. It takes 45 seconds. The officials just all huddle up together, make it look like they're talking to each other, even though they're talking in New York City, and let's go. What's wrong with that?
And the key is to what you said, which I like, is it's ref to ref.
Yes.
It's not instant replay to ref.
It's refs helping refs.
To ref.
Yes.
It's ref to ref.
Right.
It's an on-site ref to ref. I think that's good. But I think if they considered putting you on the committee, they'd say, well, we only have a 4-day meeting. If we have Eisen on the committee, it might last a week.
Who doesn't want to hang another day on the NFL dime? Mike, come on now, please. Everybody does. We'll get a massage. We'll do something. Who knows? We'll figure it out.
I like it.
Go to the spa, so. Last thing for you, too, is what do you think is happening in the NFL offices involved with Devonte Adams, who is just charged with assault of shoving over that member of the media in the tunnel? What do you make of that?
Yeah,
Mike,
listen,
what do you think's happening?
we already know that the league is taking action, right, for a player going off the field flipping off a crowd. And when you think about the fines that are associated with that, now you get a physical altercation that is certainly, all the responsibility of Adams. I think I would imagine that they're looking at this pretty seriously. And when you get an assault charge, assault filed, they've got to be very concerned like that with this. And I think when you do think about, even though this is a cameraman on the field, the action they take for abusive language or whatever to a fan, I think this is something on the hot plate right now that they're going to deal with, I would think, rather severely.
Mike Pereira, greatly appreciate your time as always. Let's do this again soon enough. Thanks, sir.
You got it.
That is Mike Pereira, at Mike Pereira, a must follow on Twitter, right here on The Rich Eisen Show.